New Orleans, the 1820s. A city draped in shadows and secrets, cloaked in a perpetual haze that clung to its cobblestone streets and antebellum mansions. They called him the Winking Death. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the docks of New Orleans came alive with murmurs and hushed conversations. Here, in the twilight, secrets were exchanged as easily as the tides rolled in. The fishermen, the traders, and the night watchmen all knew to keep their voices low and their eyes averted. It was said that if you listened closely, you could hear the whispers of the Winking Death himself. His presence was a ghostly shroud that lingered over the water, a silent reminder of the power he wielded in the shadows. One night, a young boy, no more than 10, found himself alone on the docks. He had heard the stories, but never believed them until he saw a figure cloaked and hooded standing at the edge of the pier. The figure turned, and for a brief moment the boy saw the glint of an eye, slowly closing in a deliberate wink. Terrified, the boy ran, his small feet echoing on the wooden planks, but the memory of that haunting wink stayed with him. The whispers on the docks grew louder, more insistent, each one adding to the legend of the Winking Death. As the whispers on the docks grew louder and more insistent, a shiver ran through the night, spreading like wildfire among those who dared to venture into the city's darkest corners. The air carried a chill that was not of the season, but of something far more sinister. In a narrow alleyway, shrouded in the shadows cast by flickering gas lamps, a lone figure moved with purpose. This was no ordinary night. This was a night marked by fate. The figure, cloaked in darkness, paused at the entrance of a hidden passage, known only to a select few. A gloved hand reached out, brushing against the cold, damp stone, as if seeking a connection to the secrets it held. Beneath the cloak, eyes scanned the surroundings, keen and alert. Every creak of wood, every distant murmur was a potential threat. The figure knew that in this city, to be marked by fate was to be marked for death. But there was no turning back now. The mission was clear: uncover the truth behind the whispers of vengeance that had begun to ripple through the underbelly of New Orleans. With a final, resolute breath, the figure stepped into the passage, the darkness swallowing them whole. The shiver in the night was more than just a feeling. It was a prelude to the chaos that was about to unfold. For in the heart of the city, the Winking Death awaited, and those who sought him would soon find themselves entangled in a web of deceit and danger. In the heart of the city, where opulence and decay existed side by side, a grandiose mansion stood as a testament to a bygone era. Within its walls, the air was thick with the scent of old books and forgotten memories. This was the residence of Madame Larue, a woman whose influence in the city's underbelly was both feared and revered. As the whispers of vengeance grew louder, the Madame found herself haunted by the choices she had made. She sat in her dimly lit study, surrounded by relics of the past, her fingers tracing the edges of a photograph long faded with time. The faces in the photograph were familiar yet distant, like ghosts from another life. Her regret was a silent companion, an ever-present reminder of the lives she had touched and the paths she had altered. The Madame's power had come at a cost, and now, with the city on the brink of chaos, she wondered if it had all been worth it. In the distance, the sound of footsteps echoed through the empty halls, a reminder that even in her sanctuary, she was not alone. The weight of her decisions pressed down on her, a heavy burden that no amount of wealth or influence could lift. For Madame Larue, there was no escape from the shadows of her past. The shiver in the night was more than just a prelude to chaos. It was a reminder of the Madame's regret, a sorrow that would follow her to the end of her days. And as the city moved closer to the brink, the Madame's role in the unfolding drama became ever more uncertain. Would she be a savior or a spectre of doom? Only time would tell. The writer's curiosity would soon lead him to her doorstep, and with it, the secrets she had long kept hidden would come to light. But for now, in the stillness of the night, the Madame could only wait, her regret a silent testament to the choices that had shaped her fate. In the labyrinthine alleyways of the veiled city, there existed a presence unnoticed and unseen. Known only as the unseen observer, This enigmatic figure moved like a shadow, slipping through the cracks of the city's underbelly. With eyes that missed nothing and ears that captured every whisper, the observer was a living archive of the city's secrets. On this particular night, the observer found themselves perched atop a crumbling rooftop, gazing down at the flickering lights below. The city was a mosaic of stories, each one a thread in a complex tapestry of power, betrayal, and survival. As the observer scanned the streets, their gaze fell upon the mansion of Madame Leroux. The Madame's regret was palpable, a ripple in the fabric of the night that the observer could almost touch. From their vantage point, they saw the flicker of a candle in the Madame's study, a solitary beacon in the darkness. The observer knew that the Madame's past was catching up to her and that her choices would soon come under scrutiny. But the observer's interest lay not in judgment, but in understanding. For in the unraveling of the Madame's secrets, there lay the key to the city's salvation, or its undoing. As the observer melted back into the shadows, they knew that the night's revelations were far from over. The city was a living, breathing entity, and its secrets were the lifeblood that kept it alive. And so the observer continued their silent vigil, a guardian of the unseen and the unknown, waiting for the moment when the city's fate would be decided. In the end, it was not the power of the sword or the wealth of the elite that would shape the future, but the quiet, unseen actions of those who watched from the shadows. And as the night deepened, the observer remained, a silent witness to the unfolding drama, ever vigilant, ever unseen. Deep within the heart of the veiled city, beyond the prying eyes and whispered secrets, lay a hidden chamber known only to a select few. This was the place where alliances were forged and broken, where the fate of many was decided by the few. It was here, in this shadowed enclave, that an unexpected meeting took place. The unseen observer, ever vigilant, had tracked the movements of a cloaked figure who now stood before a grand, ancient door. With a creak, the door opened, revealing a room filled with the city's most influential yet secretive figures. The air was thick with tension and unspoken agreements. As the observer watched from a hidden vantage point, the cloaked figure removed their hood, revealing none other than the elusive leader of the underground resistance. A murmur spread through the room, but the leader's raised hand silenced it. "We stand at a crossroads," the leader began, their voice calm but resolute. "The time has come to decide the future of our city." The observer leaned in closer, every word a potential key to the labyrinth of power that held the city in its grip. As the meeting progressed, a pact was formed, one that could either save the veiled city or plunge it into chaos. The observer knew that this hidden pact would have far-reaching consequences, and they would need to act swiftly to ensure the balance of power remained in check. As the leaders departed, each returning to their shadows, the observer slipped away, their mind racing with the weight of the night's revelations. The city's fate now hung by a thread, and the observer was determined to see it through to the end. For in the depth of the night, when all seemed lost, it was the unseen actions that would ultimately decide the city's destiny. And so, with a heart heavy with the burden of knowledge, the observer vanished into the darkness, ever watchful, ever unseen. The method of the winking death was always the same. A slow, deliberate closing of one eye, a knowing gesture that spoke of power and finality. Their demise was never swift, nor was it merciful. Life on the plantation was a tapestry woven with threads of cruelty and small acts of rebellion. Jericho, despite his gentle nature, became known for his quiet defiance. He refused to be broken, his spirit refusing to bend to the will of his oppressors. Jericho's transition from tortured soul to vengeful spirit was not instant. His essence, unable to find peace, seeped into the shadows of the big house. He became one with the sultry air, the rustling leaves of the magnolias. Jericho's first target was the overseer, Jebediah. One scorching afternoon, Jebediah was found lying in the middle of the cotton field, his face contorted in a silent scream. Word of Jebediah's demise spread through the plantation like wildfire. Jericho, his spirit empowered by the taste of vengeance, had found his calling. The auction block stood as a stark symbol of New Orleans' cruel trade. Human beings torn from their homes and families were paraded like cattle, their worth measured in dollars and cents. And presiding over this inhumane spectacle was the auctioneer, a man named Edgar Beaumont, whose voice, smooth as silk, could make the most horrific transaction seem like a harmless business deal. Beaumont was a master manipulator, his words a weapon that could crush spirits and enrich his own pockets. He saw nothing wrong with his profession, considered himself a cog in the machine of commerce, blind to the suffering he inflicted on a daily basis. He would soon learn that some sins could not be washed away by money or indifference. Jericho, his spirit attuned to the anguish that permeated the auction block, saw in Beaumont an embodiment of the system that had enslaved him, that continued to traffic in human misery. The auctioneer, with his gavel and his silver tongue, became Jericho's next target. It began subtly. Beaumont started seeing flashes of movement in the periphery of his vision. He'd hear whispers during his auctions, his own name echoing back at him in a distorted mockery of his own voice. He'd feel a chill down his spine, even in the sweltering heat of the auction house, a cold that seemed to emanate from within him. Word of the strange deaths, each more bizarre and unsettling than the last, reached the ears of a young writer named Alexandre Dumas, newly arrived in New Orleans. Dumas, with a thirst for adventure and a keen interest in the macabre, found himself drawn to these tales of the winking death. He saw in them the seeds of a story, a Gothic narrative that would capture the city's underbelly, its darkness and mystery. Dumas frequented the taverns and gambling dens of the French Quarter, his ears attuned to the whispers and rumours that swirled around him. He spoke to dock workers, to prostitutes, to those who lived in the shadows of the city's prosperity. Each encounter added a brushstroke to the portrait of the winking death he was constructing in his mind. One humid evening, while nursing a drink in a dimly lit tavern near the docks, Dumas overheard a conversation that sent shivers down his spine. Two men, their faces etched with fear, spoke in hushed tones of a ghostly figure, a harbinger of death with a single chilling wink. Dumas, his curiosity piqued, leaned closer, eager to glean more details about this spectral entity. "They say he walks among us," one of the men whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "A shadow in the night, seeking those who have wronged the innocent. Those who deserve it," the other man added, his eyes darting nervously around the tavern, "those who have grown fat on the backs of others." Dumas, his mind racing, listened intently, his quill scribbling furiously. He had stumbled upon a story more compelling than any he could have imagined, but as the men spoke, a chilling detail emerged. Each victim had been a slave owner, a man who built his fortune on the backs of the enslaved. And each death was a form of retribution, a balancing of the scales of justice by an unseen hand. Intrigued, Dumas pressed for more information. Who was this winking death? What drove his thirst for vengeance? The men hesitated, their eyes darting nervously. Finally, one whispered, "He was once one of them." A slave treated with unimaginable cruelty. He died at the hands of his master, but his spirit returned to seek justice. Dumas felt a chill run down his spine. He had stumbled upon a story more profound than he could have ever imagined. The winking death was not merely a vengeful spirit, but a symbol of the enduring legacy of slavery. A reminder that some sins could not be buried or forgotten. He looked up, but the men had vanished. Only their empty glasses remained. As Dumas stepped out into the humid New Orleans night, the scent of magnolias heavy in the air, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He turned, searching the shadows, but there was nothing there. Or was there? A flicker of movement in the periphery, a fleeting glimpse of a tall, shadowy figure disappearing down a narrow alleyway. And for a brief, terrifying moment, Dumas could have sworn he saw it, a single malevolent eye winking at him from the darkness. Days turned into weeks and the reign of terror continued. The whispers grew louder, the shadows seemed to lengthen, and the scent of magnolias, once a sweet reminder of southern charm, now carried the bitter tang of fear. New Orleans, once a city of vibrant life and carefree revelry, now seemed to hold its breath, its inhabitants living in the shadow of an unseen threat. The wealthy, once untouchable in their ivory towers, now trembled behind locked doors, their consciences burdened by the weight of their ill-gotten gains. Dumas, Those still gripped by a primal fear felt a strange sense of purpose. He continued to write, his quill scratching across the parchment, documenting the events that unfolded around him. He spoke to those who had lost loved ones, to those who had witnessed the chilling wink firsthand, piecing together the puzzle of the winking death's motives and his methods. He realized that the true horror lay not in the supernatural, but in the very human capacity for cruelty and indifference that had birthed such a vengeful spirit. Jericho, the winking death, was a symptom of a deeper sickness, a festering wound on the soul of a city built on exploitation and injustice. As Dumas put the finishing touches on his manuscript, a question lingered in his mind, a question that echoed through the gaslit streets of New Orleans. Would the cycle of violence ever end? Or would the winking death, forever tethered to the city of his torment, continue to haunt its inhabitants? A chilling reminder that some sins could never be truly absolved. The answer, he feared, lay hidden in the humid air, in the rustling leaves of the magnolias, in the shadows that stretched ever longer as the sun began its final descent. New Orleans, it seemed, was destined to remain a city held hostage by its past, forever haunted by the spectre of the winking death.